So, welcome everybody. Hello again. Here we are in this space together. And I know that we're not specifically diving into gene keys or human design, but we have been kind of theming some of our conversations around what those gates and keys represent, which right now we are in the 23rd. It is currently May 13th. It's Friday the 13th, my favorite day in 2022. And so today we're going to be talking about communication and miscommunication. So I would like to invite us all to come together. Like we always start our calls, rooted and grounded. Just noticing our breath, taking it into the body, and noticing the feeling of the breath passing through our nasal passages, filling up our lungs, and that nice long exhale. Just noticing the balance in the breath, and let's see if for a moment we can do what's called a box breath. So that's a 4-second inhale, a 4-second hold, a 4-second exhale, and a 4-second pause. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. And hold in that exhale, 2, 3, 4. Let's cycle through this a couple of times. And inhale, hold, exhale, and hold. And then just breathe normally. Just notice an awareness of your breath. Let's also just kind of do a really quick scan from the top of our heads. Notice if we're squinting or scrunching our foreheads. How do our eyes feel? We allow them to be closed or open. What are our ears hearing? What are we not wanting to hear? How does our throat feel? Where are our shoulders? Are they up around our ears? Are they kind of settling down and relaxing? Do we notice tension in our arms or our hands? Are they open or closed? How does your chest feel as you're noticing your breath come in and out? Are you breathing into the top of your chest? Are you breathing down towards your belly? Just observing, not judging, doesn't mean anything, just the awareness of where we're at. Noticing your hips. Do they feel tight? How does your lower back feel? How do your thighs feel? Are you sitting? Are you standing? Are you listening to this while you're out on a run or a walk? Noticing what's going on in your legs and your feet. Where your feet contact the earth or a stool, or maybe you're upside down right now in a yoga swing. Like, who knows? Just noticing where everything is at and how it feels. And noticing if there's anything that you need to just be like, you know what, I'm going to drop those shoulders for a minute. and see how they feel if I just maybe let my arms swing or hang down at my sides. Maybe I need to shake a little. Maybe I've got some tension or something I'm noticing that just needs to be shaken out. We're not going to worry about how our arms look. Like right now, I'm looking at myself on the screen, and if y'all are just listening, you're not seeing this, but I'm like, oh, there's that flap. That's okay. We just are who we are. And then let's just come back together, present in our bodies now, kind of aware of some of the feels, the sensations, and looking at these beautiful faces right in front of us. So, what do we have to talk about around communication or miscommunication? Or what the heck is going on with each of you? Like, check in. Where are
I
we
feel
at?
I feel like it's really just interesting that it's also Mercury retrograde. I'm like, what a perfect topic to discuss. Like, miscommunication always occurs in Mercury retrograde.
There's also been notable challenge to our technicality, our communications when we have solar flares. And we recently had a solar flare as well. And that oftentimes will cause difficulty and challenges with satellites and our equipment, which then also creates more
Yeah.
miscommunication or technical disconnect, right? Those difficulties and challenges.
Yeah.
And that makes me burp.
And of course, as a speech therapist, like my foundational training was or is communication. And I specialize in communication disorders. So like, where is there a breakdown in communication? Um, it's always such a good like trip to the ego when my communication is not clear, or as I shared in our group, like my husband and I are having like this conversation and he's like, I'm saying and doing this. And I'm like, and I'm not seeing this, right? Like just looking at it from different perspectives and putting the ego aside and saying, okay, I can see how I'm missing this. And I can also see how you're seeing it this way. That ego can like really interfere big time.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to say right now, I'm making my apology to Erin because this idea that we're all just going to speak one at a time and not interject is going to be hosed right from the get-go.
Me and Tanya are both unmuted and she remains muted.
Sorry, love. It's just going to be what it is. So like, let's just, we're
I'm totally
transparent.
okay with that. I'm totally fine.
So
I think the point was not, it was more about the laughs and the external noise that was gonna.
We can still do all of that, right? It's just
Yeah.
being aware. I think when you
Yeah.
don't edit, right? Like you don't see that side of like I might be talking, but you sneeze or whatever, and it goes over to it's just wherever the yellow box
Yeah.
is. But yeah, you are like, hey, this is us. Let it all hang out. It's not perfect.
Who we are.
Yeah.
exactly. So, what you guys are going to get moving forward is the raw, real version of us not having to show up as some sort of polished version. We record these coffee chats on Zoom, and we had one of our lovely Who University faculty as our person who does the edits and going back through and listening basically to each coffee chat 3 times as she was doing the edits. And she needs a sabbatical right now. So this is us just showing up. And one of the things that she had commented was, if we're all unmuted and somebody sneezes or farts in the background, like shit's gonna happen. And we were thinking, oh, we're gonna make it easy on Erin so as not to be switching frames all the time. And I realized like 2 minutes into this that that's just like, So the communication that you guys get from us is raw, unfiltered. It is what it is because it's who we are.
Yeah.
I
And
wanted
it
to
might
actually,
evolve.
oh yeah. And I was going to say, I keep coming up with raw, real, and unedited. Like, I don't know if that's the name of it ultimately or something, but like, that's what keeps coming up because that can be so many things. That can be this coffee chat. That can be who we are. That can be who you, like, it's all the realness.
Yeah.
Anyways.
It's who we all are, right?
Yeah.
It's
who we are in our natural form.
Yes.
Right. And I'm like, y'all know that this is a struggle for me with many situations where I have this like mask that I have to put on. I don't have to.
No, you've been conditioned to.
I have been conditioned to.
Yeah, of course.
It's habitual. It's totally like autopilot for me. So when I'm even like literally going raw, real, and unedited, like
terrifying.
That might be me 50% of the time, right? I think in y'all's presence, I feel really safe to do that. And not always in other places.
Sure. But that's the practice. Like that is the whole reason for Who University. That is the practice of being our authentic selves and being okay with that. I know I wore that mask for 50 plus years. Like it was terrifying, the idea that somebody would see me in my unedited raw state. In fact, it was a couple years ago that I was doing a breathwork training. And in this breathwork training, it was sort of the shaman side of breathwork training. I've had both sort of a clinical breathwork training. I've also had sort of the shamanistic, kind of a little more out there version of it. And in that, one of the breathwork journeys that I went on, the shaman journey that I went on, was I saw myself in this house and I went down into the basement and there were all these antiques and everything. There was like cobwebs and dust and stuff over everything. And I found this one magnificent stone, this big black, beautiful stone. And I remember in this journey, I brought it up and the upper part of the house was like perfection. There was this huge open light bright foyer that I placed that stone in the very center and I had it all polished up and smoothed the edges, and it was just this majestic darkness that sat in the middle of this perfect place of a house. And when we were doing reflections afterwards, the facilitator of the breathwork training said, "This is you feeling like you can only let people see you polished, perfect, like what you think everybody wants to see from you, of you. And your challenge is to just like let your unpolished, raw, real self show up." And I was like, oh, no. Great idea, but no. Don't feel safe.
Yeah, good in theory, good on paper,
Yep.
terrifying in reality.
Yep.
You're like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, why don't you just punch me in the gut too so that I can build up my abs? That sounds like a good idea. Yeah. So it can be, it's definitely a challenge. And a lot of that is like that gets into our communication, into our story. When we have a message that we want to share with the world, when we want to communicate better with people, we have to let those parts of ourselves out. And the best place to do that is to start in a safe environment.
Yeah.
Right? That's how we heal, is being able to bring our authentic selves out and change the past experience. So the past experiences, we say something or we do something or we show people a part of ourselves and that gets squashed or told that it's unacceptable, it's unlovable, it's unworthy. And it's always with good intention. We don't realize that our parents do that in the things that they say to us. It's to keep us safe, right? But if we don't have a place where we can let that rawness peek its head out, that vulnerability peek its head out, then we don't have the opportunity to heal that part of ourselves that feels like it's just not safe, that we always have to wear that mask. So when we kind of peek out from behind it, having a safe place to land, that you're just going to be met with compassion. You're just going to be met with, of course you would feel that way. Like that's what we're doing here.
I think something else that I'm just hearing from you, like when you say your parents were trying to keep you safe, I also am seeing the perspective of they were trying to keep themselves safe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I witnessed today a little girl, we went to the library for the first time. The child has never been to the library. She saw another child and literally hid under the table. And the mom was like, why is she being such a weirdo? And I was like, she doesn't know what other children are. She doesn't even know what this building is. Like, she doesn't know a building of books. She doesn't know this strange girl who's coming into her building of books now. And so we took a little walk. We went to get a drink of water, went to the bathroom, came back, and she was like this little girl's best friend. It's like she just needed a little time to like adapt and like feel safe, and like nobody was going to force her.
Mm-hmm.
But had I not been there, mom would have likely said like, come on, like you need to come over here and be nice, or, you know, whatever she might have said, and like forced this connection because mom felt like that was her job, right? Like she would have lacked compassion for her daughter in that situation. So think like, yeah, it's like, of course there are moments that they're trying to keep us safe, but sometimes they're also trying to keep themselves safe.
Yeah, I see that come through both my mom and my dad. And mom had a story, I mean, as a lesbian, at a time where like that was not safe. She was worried about losing her job. She was worried about losing me. There were a lot of things that just went unsaid. And this started very early on for her in the modeling of my grandparents, right? And how they were like, you don't speak up, you don't create a ruckus, you don't say something. So I always learned to be quiet, to not say something. I used to say, you know, well, once I became aware, I wouldn't say shit if I had a mouth full of it. I would just be quiet. And Erin, what's been your experience?
I think it's the same thing. It's just the other side, right? Like I've known what I wanted to say. It's always been, you know, the story of you're too harsh, you say what you want and look how it affects other people. So shutting it down, right? Keeping it quiet, because when you say what you really mean or feel, then you hurt other people, you know, cause other people to feel XYZ. So then you just pipe it down. I mean, we're all stuffing it down, right? But like, what place is it coming from? And learning that you can't make anyone feel any specific way. But I think, you know, our parents' generation and generations previously, right? Like that's, you know, how we were taught. And so you don't want to say something to make someone feel a certain way. Now knowing that that's not true, but that's how it's that's interpreted or received. And so then you learn not to say, you dance around your words. You don't really say what you mean. You deliver it. And obviously there's, you know, I understand where my mom was coming from. Like it was for Erin, it was coming from a place of anger and saying what I wanted to say. That's probably where the harshness came, but I can deliver the message my parents would always tell me, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. But it was coming from that energy of probably a lot of anger, pent up anger, frustration. And now I can say the same thing, but from a place of such love and compassion, and still honor and respect what I want, but it doesn't have to come with fire and
It's like
burning down the
delivery.
country as I deliver it,
Yeah, the delivery
it's in the
is
delivery.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
I know you never watched the one show. Oh my gosh, all of a sudden the name of it has escaped me, but Khaleesi at the end, she like burns the whole city down riding on her dragon because she's just like so pissed off. And it reminds me of that thing.
And also too, like, I think with communication or miscommunication, like if we actually are free to communicate how we want to and not hold back, like how often have we wanted to say something, haven't said something, and then we continue to build it up and it pent up. And then that miscommunication, right? Like we're so filled with the fury and whatever, that if we actually were to communicate what we wanted to back over here versus waiting till this part, maybe it doesn't get miscommunicated in that way because we haven't had this much space to allow it to.
And I'm like, to that point, I mean, you all know what I'm in the midst of right now without going into that. I would say too, the emotional influence in communication. So like, had I been forthcoming in the conversation with my husband in the beginning, there might not have been all of this emotional story underneath that now when we're having this conversation, I'm confused. I'm like, hold on, I don't even know what I'm thinking and feeling anymore, because it's like a heaping pile of stuff that I'm like sorting through. And thankfully we were able to like calm and like rejoin in a really like peaceful space. And we were like, okay, so here are some words and here are some words. And when we just listen to these words, we can figure it out. When we like take the emotion out of it, it's like, I don't think that people take into consideration like all of that emotional baggage that they're hanging on to and how much it affects communication.
Yeah.
Well, looking at it from the standpoint that emotion is energy in motion. That's what emotion is. So our thoughts and our feelings are very much tied together. Thoughts are the language of the brain. Feelings are the language of the body and the senses. And when our emotions are high, our intelligence becomes low. And so, yeah, when we're in those states, when we're feeling not safe and our emotions are high, then communication is peppered with all of that energy that's behind it. In some cases, it might be anger. In some cases, it might be the flight part of our stress reaction, like just wanting to get away from this conversation. And for a lot of us, it goes into freeze, where we just either feel dumb or at a loss for our words or unable to communicate because the emotion is so high, we literally have become disabled and disconnected. The sensations going on within our body are so overwhelming.
And also, oh, sorry, Tanya, go ahead.
I was just going to say that our words are gone.
Yeah.
And I keep going back to alluding to like parents and society, right? But like a lot of us learn how to communicate, well, two ways, right? We either learn how to communicate the way our parents did and we model that, or we're like, I mean, for me, it was like my parents, if they were upset, it was yelling, right? And so I have a lot of my parenting, I go the opposite way, right? Of like, I don't want to yell. How do we have those calmer? It's not to say that I don't get angry and don't, but like, I want to have those conversations. It's like not an argument, but a conversation. And we're not taught how to communicate. It's how did you communicate? And sometimes we might like not even communicate it. Like it's not even miscommunication. It's just no communication.
Yes. They should know better.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't tell you how many times I feel like it is like etched in the stone of my body right? Like that was the message that I feel like I always got as a child. Anytime I messed up, it was like, you should know better. And I mean, possibly I did. I don't know. Maybe I did things on purpose just to like poke the bear. I don't know. But yeah, it's like when we have that thought, it's just like a dead end, right? Like there's no growth there. There's no curiosity to go like, but why did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right. And no learning.
It's the extremes. When, like Erin, your family saying, or your family being the yellers, like anytime things escalate, it escalated to yelling. So of course you would want to have the opposite experience where I'm not going to be a yeller. I'm going to be someone who's calm. And then having those moments where you get triggered
Mm-hmm.
in a situation and you find yourself yelling, and then we're basically before we learn how to do it differently, what's the first thing that we usually do? First we flip our lid and we go back into our programming, because that's what's in our body. Our body knows how. Like our lids flip off, we get emotional, our intelligence comes down, and we react. And then we get mad at ourselves.
Actually, when I think about this, it's like I was so committed to not yelling that I didn't yell. So then when I started to actually, I would stuff it down, right? Because I didn't want to yell, right? And so then there have been times when Grayson has been like, Mom, I don't know what to do. You're raising your voice. And it's so foreign to her because I don't want to do that. So she doesn't even know how to respond anything, because it's like, what is happening? You never get mad. Right. Which that's not, and we keep talking about like the ends of the spectrum and like, where's the middle? Right. But like learning how to be like, Mommy also gets to be upset too. And this is what this looks like, because for so long, it's like, I don't want to be that mom who is angry all the time, who is yelling at everything that happens. But that's not healthy either, because moms get mad.
Well, and it's like to show too, which you all also know, like, I don't always feel like anger is safe.
Yeah.
Right. Anger to me is aggressive. Anger is unpredictable. It's too risky.
And there's something wrong with you if you're angry. Right?
Exactly.
That's how I was. Yeah.
It's like a 2-year-old with the key to the fire, with key to the Ferrari, right?
Yeah, running with scissors, or like it's like way dangerous.
Yeah.
But to think about having a safe model of anger, which I know you all are like helping me through that right now. Yeah, I think like that's our gift to our children, that like this rainbow of emotions that we all have are all safe and they're all welcome.
I love that rainbow of emotions.
It really came out of my mouth.
Because that's really what it is. And we judge, right? We always say like good emotions, bad or positive or negative. It's like, no, it's just like all the things, all of them are welcome. And
oh, it makes me think of that movie. What is the movie on? Is it a Pixar with the blue, the green, the red, and the yellow?
Yeah. There was a couple.
Inside Out. Inside Out.
Inside Out.
And again, like the red is anger, but like at no point is he bad. Right? He's just an expression.
Exactly.
I love how children movies are like so beneficial for adults.
And noticing how much I think that the movies have changed in like how much emotional, like
vocabulary.
Yeah. And just like, Inside Out. And there was a couple,
that turning red was another one.
Yeah. How they're moving to like emotion, like they're talking about emotions. It's about emotions,
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the practices that we all want to highlight here is that not only are emotions not good or bad, they're just feedback. They're just sensory feedback to what we're experiencing. But starting the conversation around, of course, we're going to have times where, so like Erin, you're the best example I can think of right now. The adaptation of quieting your voice and repressing how you were feeling inside. And when you have those moments where you sort of like, you can't contain that volcano anymore, and you raise your voice, it's going to compassion. Of course, like this is how I would respond. I would respond this way because this is what was modeled for me by my parents and likely my grandparents and so on and so forth. And just the human condition. We as humans are not well versed at feeling the emotions, the sensory inputs that are coming through our body. It hasn't been safe. It hasn't been welcome. And so changing the dynamic of, like, for Kristie and I, feeling safe to erupt, to let that anger come out, because then the beautiful thing about it is when we're in a safe space, when we're in relationships that allow for our growth, that are open to that, we can then sort of change the result of the narrative. And when I say that, I mean, like, for example, Erin, you being able to yell and then say to Grayson, like, I feel these feelings too. And having grace and compassion for yourself on the inward, of course I would react this way because this is what was modeled for me. Whereas most of us, if we're not even slightly aware, are beating ourselves up. We shouldn't have responded that way, or we're still very much in that anger, because once that volcano has started to erupt, sometimes it's like it's going to run its course. And then we have this damage left in the wake because afterwards we have never been modeled how to do repair.
Yeah, that's been the biggest thing, I think, because as that little girl, as Erin knows what it feels like to have your parents yell at you, right? So when I am not in my best, I don't know what you want to call it, when I have those episodes of raising my voice or I get more stern, right? Having grace and compassion for myself, because I see it from both sides, right? Like, I know what it feels like to be Grayson and to have a parent be upset and yell at you or be stern with you. And that doesn't feel good. And also from the parent standpoint, having the compassion for myself of like, listen, it just happens sometimes.
You're also a human.
Yeah. And not happens is like, oh, well, too bad. But it's just like, listen, you're feeling your feelings, and listen, the recovery, like we talked about, the recovery, the repair, that's where it's like getting to come back instead of beating myself up for 5 days and I'm a terrible mom, right? And how I'm going to damage my kid, which we all are. So let's just get that up. But like, really just like, listen, Grayson, mom gets upset too. And I don't have all the answers and I'm not perfect. And even when she comes back and was like, well, you've done that before, right? Because that's the even like next level for me of like, I know I've done it before and I'm still working on it. And
and it's likely going to happen again.
Yeah.
That's
and I
how
think
we
that's
learn.
the beauty, right? I'm like, that's the beauty of the human experience, because when we think that perfect is the goal, that's when we're all disappointed, right? When our children idolize us and think that we're the perfect, like, let me just prove to you that I'm still a human. Right. And hopefully that grace that we give ourselves gets passed on to them. Right. It's like this big circle of humanity.
Mm-hmm. When we heal ourselves, when we allow ourselves to take down the mask, when we allow ourselves to say the things that we haven't been able to say, we need that safe environment in which to do so. But then what's important is being able to realize that transition that has occurred, that experience that has happened, and it's going to need to keep happening because that's how we learn. When we're kids, from the age of 0 to 7, our brainwaves were essentially like little sponges. We're in a state of almost like hypnosis and repetition. Those two things are how we learn. When we get out of the brain waves of the beta brain waves that are like the doing, the being on high alert kind of thing. And we get into sort of that almost hypnotic into those alpha delta brain waves. That's where we learn. And also through repetition is where we learn. Well, guess what? That means we're going to fuck up a lot.
Yeah.
And each time we do, and then we do the recovery piece and we do the repair piece, both with those around us as well as with ourselves. And that's the most important piece, is with ourselves.
I was just getting ready to say that one is the hardest one for me.
It is.
And I do believe that part of that is that like it just didn't exist. Like repair wasn't even a thing. That's what my husband and I were just talking about the other day. We're like, what was upbringing like? And it was just either conflict, which was my family. We would just like everything that came to the mind came out the mouth, right? And then it was avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that repair was actively modeled to me. I feel like that was like a novel concept. When I heard that, I was like, oh, yeah, like totally makes sense.
Repair was modeled, but it was met with, I'm sorry. And then it was met with, well, if you're sorry, you wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Right. And so then that brings up even more like, I'm not controlling myself. Then you can go into that shame spiral of like, I'm saying I'm sorry and I'm still messing up. So what's wrong with me? Because I keep doing the same thing over and over again.
That's not repair.
I know.
It's not safe. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also was the I'm sorry an obligatory I'm sorry? Because y'all know this is a soapbox of mine. Like
I think it was probably genuine, and it was from a place of like, I'm sorry, I just lose my shit. Like, I mean, I can just, my dad just loses shit, and he's like, I'm sorry. And my mom would be like, well, if you're sorry, you wouldn't keep doing it. And it's like, well, think about, here we go back to like, is there ever been a safe space to let all that anger out? Because it keeps happening over and over because we haven't really dealt with, and I don't know about dealt, right? But like, we haven't, dealt with the cause of why we keep getting angry. Like, what is that place in us that doesn't feel seen, heard, all of the things that's why it keeps coming up,
Yeah. I'm just having like this major epiphany right now, maybe not epiphany, but just more of an awareness of like how many times I may have said those exact words to my son. And forced an apology also for two separate categories. All of it, of course, just wanting to control. Because I needed him to act a certain way for my ego, right? For my whatever, my parenting identity. So interesting.
And that comes from a place of you thinking, I need to keep him safe, and I need to keep him safe by maintaining a connection, by apologizing and saving face, perhaps. Like, we just had a conflict. Now, how do we get rid of that? How do we get past that as quickly as possible?
Well, and I think partly it was me treating him like a puppet. Like, this is how you're supposed to act. Yeah.
Like, you did this, you need to say sorry. And I mean, and I'm not sorry. I'm still angry right now.
Right. And likely, I would say 50% of his interactions were very just like impulsive, like they weren't even intentional. And that empathy that I wanted him to have, that it wasn't an innate skill of his. I wanted to force it. I wanted to teach it. And it's like, that just takes time.
Well, also, right, this is what we always go back to saying, being the lighthouse. Like, we don't have to teach it when we model it, when we are the parents or the people, the humans, right, that we mess up, we recover, or repair, we have our repair, we, genuinely apologize when all of these things that we want our children or whomever to be. But when we are those for ourselves, and then people get to see that versus, I think old paradigm of teaching is like, I'm going to teach you how to do it. It's like, I don't know if it's Abraham said this, or maybe it was Larry Morrison, but he was like, we can't parent from a lower vibration than where our children are,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so when you are a parent who is filled with not you, Kristie, but you as a human, whoever you are, right? If we're filled with anger and frustration and resentment and all of these things, and we're trying to teach our
Fear.
children to be, you know,
Yes.
these other things, it's like the kids, you can't pull one over on them. They're like,
Yes.
mom's not like that. Like, I'm
Oh
not
my
listening
God.
to you.
Yes. I'm like, and the word that comes to me is fear, right? Like,
Yes.
so just having this conversation with one of my parents today, and her son had a rather tragic birth, and the doctors had said, like, there's a possibility that he's going to have learning differences. Like, this child is very young. So who knows what his future will be. And she brings me on and she's like, how can we prevent this? And like in my gut, I'm like, oh, we don't prevent anything. We just support him along his journey. Right. But of course, that is exactly what I was doing with my son. I was like, trying to prevent. If I controlled him, I was preventing a problem later. Right. And of course, I didn't have any of this perspective or support back in those days. Like, had I known about the idea of like me just holding that space for myself of confidence and safety and security and compassion and love, that was like the nurturing soil that he was going to grow up in. Right. And he was going to be a product of that environment, not out of my control.
And we don't have to, because I think for a long time I was like, well, now I know this. Look at all the damage I've done. Like, we can always, we start now, right? We start now and we start now and we start now and now and now and now, right? Like, we know these things and it's okay. And we can continue, you know, because I think there's lots of us that like, well, I know this. Look at how all the things I messed up on. It's like,
oh yeah. And to me, I look at those as learning, right? Like all of those experiences fuel everything that I do for parents right now. I'm like, it's the heart and soul. I'm like, I feel like I could accredit all of my growth to my son. I'm sure my daughter is in there too, but she actually did come up today. But Max is a little more. He's teaching me a lot.
Isn't that what's a wonderful thing about our relationships? It can be children, it can be coworkers, it can be spouses, it can be our animals sometimes even. The relationships that we have and how they provide that growth and learning for us. I know, so I didn't get here overnight. I started out seeing everything that was happening to me. And from that to me place, it was a victim. It was always a victim because I had no control over what was happening to me. Now I see everything is happening for me. And like I said, that did not happen overnight. This has been a several years of journey. It's been a lifetime actually of being able to see all of my past experiences as the fuel that has helped me find who I am now and who it is that I am realizing more and more is my authentic self. I could mask off. Here we go, naked, skivvies, raw, like this, it is what it is kind of thing. But, you know, we're so busy saying oftentimes, like I did this too, I screwed up my kid, or like, well, crap, maybe I need to have another kid now because like I messed up the first few. Or I don't ever want to have a kid
because that
again.
solves all the problems. Have more children.
Or
sorry,
like
that just caught me off guard.
Can I put the one I had back?
Oh,
Can we start over? Can I have a do-over?
Oh yeah.
But you know, realizing that sometimes the things that we screwed up with our kids, or that we're perceiving that we screwed up with our kids, could potentially also be the gift that we're giving them, because it is it is out of these moments where we feel like we've been constrained or we feel like we've not been allowed to be our authentic self that gives us a little bit of that push to want to be alive, to want to come out and say no or yes. I think about the life cycle of the butterfly. The butterfly starts out as a hungry caterpillar. It's just eating its entire way through life, just taking in all the nutrients it can, and filling up until it comes time to go into the chrysalis, and it essentially just melts itself into DNA soup. And then it restructures and puts itself back together as a butterfly. And as that butterfly, it has to have the struggle to open its wings to get out of that chrysalis, because if somebody were to try and help it to open that chrysalis, the butterfly will die. So sometimes the gift that we're giving is allowing our children to have some of those experiences that are less than perfect, so that they can evolve into a better version of a human being than what we've been, right? And with each generation, there's this opportunity for healing. There's this opportunity to see life as happening for them instead of to them, and to explore all the things that can help them evolve as humans.
I love that perspective. And I see so clearly how shifting the focus of the story from things are happening to me to happening for me. Because when you get to see your own life through that lens, then you get to share that perspective with other people. And it really is so freeing there to think about. It's bordering a gift that you're giving your children, right? Like it might not be the gift that you would want to give them, but in time, I'm like, yeah, I could see a lot of value in the interactions I've had with my children that I had used to hold shame and guilt around. Yeah, how that could serve them in their life.
We give them the contrast. Like if all we gave them to cook with was sugar, life would be really boring. They need some flour, they need some butter, they need all the ingredients. And that is, like, I was just having a conversation with someone today about where I'm at right now and how being very present in this space is allowing me to heal, and potentially my husband to heal or transform some old childhood wounds. But I was like, okay, bring the focus back to me. What is this changing for me? Good and or what I would have in the past labeled as good and or bad experience. And what I'm realizing is there were aspects of my childhood that I'm like, yes, I want to keep this. Like dinners together at the table, having conversation. I want to keep that. Going on trips together, going on adventures together. Yes, I want to keep that. Having an experience that felt shameful and being told to keep quiet about it, to not share it. That's not something I want to keep, but I'm so glad it happened for me, so that I have the experience of being able to say, there was a time where I allowed myself to be kept small, to be kept quiet through my conditioning, through the experience of my parents. And I don't want that anymore. That doesn't serve me anymore. But the gift that it brings me is I can watch your journey. I can watch Erin's journey and say, I understand how you feel. I can totally relate to that story, to that narrative, to that experience. And when we do that, we relate to each other's humanness, and we realize that all of our stories, our experiences, our communication, our miscommunication is really the same. You know,
Yeah.
we think that we're different, but we're not. We're all having the human experience. And it's within all of the colors, all the rainbow of emotions
Yeah.
that we get to paint with that.
Yeah. Makes me think of the word nourishment as well. Again, I'm like having a little semantic battle in my head because
Mhm.
I always think about like gift and nourishment to be like a positive thing. And to think about how like some conflict could be positive is it's like a little contradictory. I just heard a concept the other day about like your body could not survive on just sugar alone, right? We need nourishment in a variety of ways. And
Mhm.
like when I'm hearing you talk about like only getting sugar as like only getting the good, right? Like we're missing nourishment there.
Yeah.
That soul nourishment. It's like part of the recipe of life is to have these obstacles.
To feel the anger, to feel the sadness, to sometimes even feel shame or disgust,
Yeah.
so that we're painting with a full palette.
Yeah. And like you said, even if it is just to have an experience that says, I don't want this, right?
Mhm.
Like I attest to have yelling probably more than I want to admit at my children. And like, even for my daughter or my son to just say like, that's not how I want to parent my children. Right. Or like, I refuse to have a spouse yell at me, or I refuse to have a coworker yell at me, right? Like where it kind of allows them to have some boundaries within themselves. Say that
Mhm.
doesn't feel good when I'm in those situations, you know?
When you
Yeah.
talk about food, right? You think about, how do we know sugar's sweet? Because we've had something bitter, because we've had something
Like
rough on our
contrast.
tongue. We've had something that doesn't taste like sugar
Yeah.
to know sugar is sweet. But if we only had sugar, it would just be like bland, right? And I think that when we don't have those, we can only have as much joy as we are ready to feel as much sadness, right? And it's just like that allows us to know what sweetness and joy and wonder and delight feels like, because we've had sadness and all the other emotions.
Yeah.
Which in that case brings up that there's actually some beauty and nourishment in miscommunication, in that disconnect, in where we feel misunderstood, where we don't feel heard, so that we can recognize when we are feeling heard, the difference that that produces in our body and how we feel with that.
Yep.
When we have clear communication and the ease and flow that that allows for, versus when we have miscommunication. Oh, we missed that one.
Yeah.
We didn't connect. And what's behind that? Oh, some fear. Okay, well, can we allow that fear to come up? Can we allow that fear to be in the presence of safety, love, compassion, and realize that we're all just humans having a human experience, and the whole rainbow is needed.
Yep.
Yeah.
So good.
Rainbow of emotions.
It reminds me of 30 years of doing nails and teaching color theory, and how we have our red, our yellow, and our blue as our primary colors that we play with. Then we have the tertiary when we mix things in, and then how we need white and black, like absence of color and all of the full spectrum of color to shade and tint, and like, yeah. Like
Fun.
I could probably have a whole talk on color theory and emotions, and how we need to have the full spectrum
That's fun.
and be in our darkness as well as our light. Yeah.
All are important.
Yep. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is so much fun.
Yeah.
So good.
Until next time.
Until next
next
time.
time.
Okay.
I love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.